Talk.
Because I just see your eyebrows like going up and down.
Mom, what is she?
No, okay, we can't do it that way. That's not working.
All right, well, you got to be living under a rock if you don't recognize that a number of people, probably record numbers of people right now in America, are recognizing the value of preparedness. I dare say a number of people right now in America think this flag over my shoulder ought to be draped upside down. Regardless of where you come at this, there's no person with any sense at all that thinks everything is normal. So that brings me into preparedness. And folks, I just want to say right off, look, I'm not saying this as an appeal to authority or anything like that, but we've been at this a very long time. In fact, it was preparedness that brought us to permaculture. The problem we saw is that within preparedness circles, everybody had their little pet thing, whether it was firearms, whether it was your vehicles, whether in some cases food production, but there was never a unified field theory where every bit of that came together. The biggest hole in the game that we saw with so many people was that there was no means for resupply that didn't involve the very system they got their stuff from in the first place. Until I discovered the Greening the Desert video with Jeff Lawton. And that was paradigm changing for me and my family, because I'm seeing a guy doing unbelievable things in a place on earth where it shouldn't happen. So naturally I thought, okay, if he can do that there in the middle of Jordan, what can I do in a place, and how can I have an abundant place in the middle of America or wherever you may be without all of those harsh environments? So that brings us to what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about preparedness with permaculture, and we're going to show you the systems that help make that possible. All right, one of the most common places you can start in terms of preparedness is, like I said, go after your beans, your dry goods, all those things. So if anything jumps off, then bam, you're already squared away. But you should be constantly working on your resupply, and this is the easiest place to start for most people. What do we have in here?
So we have a bunch of different kinds of beets. There's some golden and just some plain red beets, and then there's spinach, which keeps growing in our North Carolina winter. It's probably not going to grow everywhere, but we have some spinach, and then we also have some kale that you can even start in pots. You don't have to have raised beds. If you just have pots on your front porch or your balcony, you can start greens in pots.
Right, now, if you take a look at all of our previous videos, folks, you can't just take one element and put it in a vacuum. The compost in here we created. So you start wherever you can, and you do it anywhere in any place you possibly can. Grow your food on a balcony if that's the kind of place you live in. Grow it anywhere you can. In fact, you don't even need to own the land. If you look at some of the earliest videos we did here, we were farming at my job. So folks, there are places out there, whether it's in your garden or whether you learn how to forage and go out there and find tons and tons and tons of food that are just growing wild out there. Folks, the sky's the limit in the number of ways, but right here is the gateway drug where if you're concerned about resupply, it's the best place to start. So initially, let's say you're getting started, you're going to have to initially buy the seeds. But then what happens when you produce and then you start, every time you produce, the seeds, the genetic offspring of those seeds becomes a little bit better adapted to the land you're on. So that takes us back to the greenhouse. We can start them in there. When the weather's suitable, we bring them out here, put them in the ground, and then we're off and running. So this cycle can go over and over and over again where you have a constant resupply. And don't think about those survival seeds, folks. I know a lot of people out there think, oh, well, I got these seeds. Well, I can almost guarantee you that those seeds are probably not adapted to your region. Who knows where they came from? So you want to have a history of growing things that work in your environment. Not wait until there's some disaster. And then what are you going to do for the 3 months you're waiting for that food to come up? Something to think about.
Okay, here in the greenhouse we have some seeds started. We have some Mizuna greens, some spinach, lacinato kale, and some arugula that needs to be transplanted out into the garden beds. So typically we would have more seeds started, but we just built the greenhouse and it's January, so this is what we have going on right now. Okay, so we have some turmeric that was growing. It's not so much anymore because it's winter and we just let it die. But like you can see, the turmeric is also, it's a spice, but you can also use it. I give it every day to the lambs as an anti-inflammatory. So this is just another example of what you can grow. In addition to growing food, you can grow your own medicine.
All right, another cool way of preparedness, obviously, is everybody's gateway into animals, and that's chickens. And particularly, I would suggest, when you're looking at it in terms of preparedness, you want to think about dual-purpose birds. Birds that not only lay eggs, but ones that you could use as meat if you have to. So that brings us to chickens, and then, of course, that can lead into pigs and cows and sheep and a number of other things. But these are guys, especially with other systems, and as you can see right now, they're preparing the next phase in our preparedness. This is going to be another garden, so there's nothing that we do that's in a vacuum, folks. That's the most important thing to take away from this in terms of permaculture and preparedness. Every little thing is tied to something else in numerous ways. So the wonderful chickens up there led to this awesome compost that we're going to use not only in the vegetable beds, but really everywhere. We're going to use it with our perennials, which we'll talk about here in a second. We'll use it with our trees. We'll use it every single place, but this is once again explaining why no single thing happens in a vacuum. That compost is life. So what else have we got over here? Another cool thing in terms of preparedness are the systems that you can cultivate passively. And what do I mean by that? Things that you can kind of put into place and really don't require a whole lot in terms of upkeep. Well, you're looking at it right here. We've only been here in this area for less than a year. And folks, we pulled in about 20 gallons of honey last year. So that's significant. So there's another means of food production. And plus, not to mention all the wonderful things the bees take care of for you in terms of pollination. So every single thing, like I said before, is like the fingers of your hand in terms of permaculture. But if you'll notice a common theme with all of our videos, there's always, whether you know it or not, there's always some sort of, you can look at it as permaculture, but you can also overlay it with preparedness. They both go hand in hand, folks. This is why I was saying that the one element missing in preparedness, the way most people think about it, is resupply. And folks, this is how you make it happen. Now let's take a trip over here and talk about the perennials. Let's talk about the trees. Let's talk about a food forest, more of that passive food production. Folks, what you're looking at here is probably one of the more important parts of resupply in terms of preparedness. But it's just a cool way to do things anyway. And what am I talking about? Once again, the passive food production, things you put into place that don't necessarily require a bunch of upkeep. This isn't like your annuals that you're going to have in your vegetable bed up there. These are perennials. They keep coming back. Every tree, as you've watched before, is flanked by at least a couple of blueberries and also a couple of legume bushes that you could also eat. So there's tons of food production that you can have right here in close proximity to your place. And in the places like a food forest, there's tons of food in there that the average eye wouldn't even know that exists in that single place. But folks, also within this area, if you can put in trees, there's any number of things. You can even grow your annuals in between the spaces. More of a syntropic type design. Folks, the passive food production is one of the critical elements of preparedness I think is most neglected. Keep in mind that not only are these in the future going to provide fruit, things you can preserve, it doesn't matter. You not only have that, but think about what they also attract. The reason why we got this steak here with that bone sauce on it. If this weren't here, we'd have deer running around this place. If you found yourself in a preparedness type event or in an event where you needed to be prepared, that could be another food source, right? Also got rabbits, other wildlife. Folks, just when you put in these systems, it attracts wildlife. So you can use those things to your advantage if you found yourself in a position of needing to use it as your advantage. All right, folks, we cited a number of ways right now where, depending on where you are, you can find some way to make that work for you. And folks, I also want to say that within this whole preparedness model, how permaculture fits into it, look at the very ground I'm standing on. This is a pasture that we raise our animals in. And by good, proper management of it, it keeps producing food for us. So the point being is that you can put all these systems in place. Not one of them works in a vacuum, not unless you're going to use a lot of chemicals, which is something we don't want to do, right? But all these things work like the fingers of your hand. So we have our perennial systems, we have our annual systems, we got annual systems. We also have our bees over here. All of them work together in some capacity or another. So folks, I hope you can find something useful out of this and recognize it's cool to get the storage crops you need right now to put away in case something jumps off. But it's also important to think about your resupply and how you can go about producing that resupply in very close proximity to where you currently live. So remember, subscribe, tell your friends about us. And until next time, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, where today, PIMP stands for Permaculture is my preparedness. We'll see you next time.